Good evening, everybody. It is very weird for me to do the welcome. We were so used to having Rowan every Wednesday evening, and here we are now. But I actually have a new guest for us, Marilee Skitter. She is going to be joining us to help us out with the questions, because the truth is, if I have to keep an eye on Facebook for questions, there's no way we're going to keep my focus. Bruno and Greg, I am theoretically the one that should be stronger on multitasking, so I'm not even going to try and make this a you problem. But so Marilee, thank you so much for helping us out, and welcome to the Property Law Alliance Wednesday webinars.
Thank you so much.
I was thinking, guys, to start off with, we've had quite a few conversations around hijacked buildings, and it's always a very interesting conversation to have. So we'll get into all the other questions, and I promise by the end we will talk about the level 3 regulations that we don't have yet. So I promise we're going to talk about lockdown stuff, but I think by now we all a little over webinared and over talked about lockdown and COVID-19, and as entertaining as it is, we thought for this evening, let's talk about hijacked buildings, because what we are seeing in this particularly because we have this situation of a bunch of tenants really struggling to pay rent, but then unfortunately also organizations or sort of associations, I can't even find the proper word here, asking for tenants and pushing tenants to withhold rent, which very often leads to hijacked buildings. How do we deal with that? So, Greg, it's one of those conversations where I can just put it out there, and I'm going to be like Rowan. I'm just going to sit back and smile and watch you two talk about hijacked buildings. So have fun.
Silna, I think the prospect of you staying in the background completely very slim, but let's jump in. I mean, Bruno and I certainly over the last week have had this kind of problem. You may well have as well. You know, just by way of intro, when times are tough, the economy's been bad for a couple of years already. We're talking mostly about buildings of some scale, where there's the potential for an individual to maybe influence others. And I've been doing this for a while, and there are two scenarios. There's the building hijack scenario, and I don't know if everyone has ever seen that movie called Jerusalem. If you haven't and you're in property, it is well worth a watch. In the early 2000s, when Joburg City was in a very bad way, you would have the literal building hijack, where someone would arrive, some heavy guy with some friends and some guns, and say, right, I now run this building. And that happened a lot. With inner city degradation during the 90s, Joburg was in very steep decline, and landlords just left. They left the country, they left in the inner city, they abandoned their buildings, leaving things in an absolute free-for-all. And I please implore you to watch that movie Jerusalem, because it's very, very accurate. But for one thing, in Jerusalem, the SAPS fixed the problem, and in truth, the Joburg City Council fixed the problem. So what happened was, by the mid-2000s, business had seen that the city wasn't going to abandon town, and the commercial imperative took over, and I'm happy to say it still prevails. So I literally saw in 2005, a multi-story building went for 100,000 Rand and the municipal debt. The next year, the very same building went for 10 million Rand as business started chasing opportunity. And what happened was, well, we've all participated and seen in what happened since. But I need to differentiate between the building hijacking, which sometimes still happens, not often, but sometimes, and a rent boycott that is frequently referred to as a building hijacking. Now, the problem with the rent boycotts is it frequently is a low-grade hijack, frequently but not always. the committee see, okay, my landlord isn't very good. They're a bit absent. They don't really do much for us. They collect rental every month, but the conditions are bad and the maintenance is poor, and I don't really know who they are. So there's almost a playbook. In fact, it's so predictable that we have an extract from a 2015 affidavit that we literally put in an annexure in our court papers. This is how a rent boycott / hijack works. Firstly, there's a denial of ownership or an attempt to impugn ownership. Secondly, there's a suggestion that you guys pool your rent with us. We will arrange proper maintenance. We will do it properly. And we will, we will ensure that your tenant rights are looked after. Then that rental is pooled. Then obviously, hop, skip, and a jump, and you into a what we would call a conventional hijack. But I've often observed that more conventional rent boycotts are sometimes equated with hijack, with the building hijack, and one needs to identify what is actually happening. Now the problem is getting to where we are now. Times are very hard and very tough, and people are genuinely worried about their short and medium-term ability to pay rent. So they are prone to accepting a messiah that comes along and says, don't pay those guys your rent, pay them half, pay them nothing. We will collaborate collectively and keep them at bay. In my experience over the last few years, someone's in trouble with their rent, so he tries to get out of trouble by recruiting others. And that, you don't get out of trouble by getting others into trouble. But this is the way it works. So what we've often found in the last couple of years is the city council aggressively credit controlling or trying to credit control and cutting off electricity on a Friday afternoon, leaving a building without power or without water for a weekend. Those are the types of instances that can prompt a rent boycott, because often there's a legitimate query into the city, for example, but they ignore the query and cut the services off anyway, giving the tenant the view that they are paying services to the landlord that's not paying it over to the city. The point I'm getting to is that many buildings, especially in the Johannesburg inner city, are prone to a boycott at the drop of a hat. And while we're in a very difficult position now with people struggling to pay rent, what we thought amongst us, with a view to talking this evening, was we are in a vulnerable time and people need to be aware. Bruno's had other experiences, so we need to be very careful right now of the potential for a boycott. On that, let me leave the floor to my colleagues.
No, but absolutely true. And I think these desperate times are causing this. So what we've noticed from our side, obviously, is people find more power in with the mob mentality. So being in a group gives them a lot more security, gives them closure. They feel that, if it's going to happen, it needs to happen to everyone. The problem is who you put your faith behind. And I mean, I suppose this comes down to, we've been doing it as a country when it came to like e-tolls, for example, where everyone hid behind and went, well, you know what, it must be unconstitutional. We haven't done anything ourselves, but that guy's saying it, so we're supporting it and we're not paying e-tolls. Now, this is obviously on a far smaller level. And because it's on a far smaller level, there's a lot less power that can actually be exercised. And that's now what we need to deal with. So with some of the guys that are giving this hope to tenants, I remember at the end of the day, these guys only have so many resources. So I've seen situations where all of a sudden they disappear, or their resources stop at a certain moment and they can't actually take it through. So as eventually you take it to court and you're fighting the matter, now all of a sudden the tenants need to go off and find somebody else because they're not around anymore. And when you dig a little bit deeper, what ends up happening is a lot of promises were made, a lot of submissions were made as to what the law said. But the reality is those weren't true. And as soon as the tables start turning, that's when all of a sudden the tenants realize that they are actually in trouble. And all of this is going to come falling down on them, and not, like Greg mentioned, the Messiah that they put so much faith in right at the beginning. And I mean, I'm reading one of the letters now that we got from these associations. And it's basically 1 page of who they are and 3 pages of threats on how the landlords are going to jail if they even try to collect rent. It's like 3 pages of fines, imprisonment, you name it. It is scare tactics. It is trying to put landlords in a certain position where they're worried about going forward. And what Greg and I actually discussed was, unfortunately, the tenants are the ones that are going to end up suffering as well. Because eventually when the eviction comes along and the cost orders come along and the rental collection comes along, the tenants are going to be responsible, not having realized that the advice that they had didn't come from a proper attorney. It came from someone with experience in the industry, but not the correct type of experience. And what do we do then? And I suppose, I don't know, Silna, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think I must say I've seen a few of these. Luckily, in the majority of the evictions that we deal with, typically one landlord, single property. We don't do as many multi-let type evictions as you guys see, simply because of the type of client we have. It is a different thing. But I've seen that, Greg. I remember, I think it was a year ago when I had an issue in Windsor West. And I remember it happened, and I sat in the police station during that meeting, and I realized, whoa, this is not my kind of evictions. This is, I told you. The only thing I did is I picked up my phone, Greg for Mark. Greg, help me. Because it is a very unique situation. And as much as I get the law behind it, I think my 10 cents to the conversation is simply for the landlord that's in a situation like that. I'm going to throw the ball back to you now on what the landlord can do, because what I've seen, and I saw this in a post over the weekend, where we all three were actually involved in the conversation there as well, was the landlord says, I understand I need to evict this person that's been hijacking the building. What about the situation where that person isn't in a building? There's these scare tactics, and none of that is real. What should the landlord be doing? But more importantly, what I want to talk about is the effect on the tenant. Because Bruno, as you rightly said, the poor tenant is innocent. Greg, like you said, the tenant is stressed. He can't pay his rent. Instead of following the right procedure, using the rent deferment documentation that's available through TPN for free, instead of using the right things, following the right advice, they latch onto anybody. And the problem is, I can see that already spilling over into my kind of clients, which is the landlord that's represented by a rental agent, which is not the type of hijack situations that we see, but we're starting to see this now. And that seriously concerns me, because what a tenant might not realize is, if you pay your rent to another person and not to the landlord, you are in breach of your lease agreement. You will be evicted, and you will lose the money that you are paying to a random person X. He's not going to stand up in court and protect you. Even if he does, in law, you do not have a defense to an eviction because you paid rent to random person X. There was no legal connection between that person and your landlord. So it's scary for tenants, because I think we are going to evict a lot of people that thought they're paying rent to a third party, and then they still get evicted. And honestly, it breaks my heart that we have to do that, but that is the position for the landlord. If the landlord doesn't receive his rent, he's entitled to cancel the lease agreement and do an eviction. Or for that matter, if somebody just randomly occupies, obviously the landlord can evict. but that's the scary part for the tenants. And then obviously they're stuck with an eviction on their credit record. That's not really how to make friends and influence people at the bank. So that's a bit of a problem. But the landlord, my answer would always be, your first thing is to go for an interdict this person from doing whatever he's doing. But it might, unfortunately, be paired immediately with a bunch of evictions as well on tenants that hasn't been paying. What's the right route for the landlord there?
I wonder, you know, one of the founding imperatives of this group early in deep lockdown was to assist our collective clients and people in the industry with how to wade through this morass of weird stuff coming your way. And I'm very proud that you two guys got this thing going, because I think it's done that to quite a high degree, but that's just an aside. Right now, in these difficult times, it appears to me it's easier if you are a landlord at scale, because obviously you've got the benefit of averaging. Now, we must assume that many of those of us on this platform don't have scale. So it's either fine for you or it's terrible for you. You know, if you have a number of flats, properties, whatever the case may be, then you know you'll probably be at 60 or 70% now. But it's you one or the other right now. And so it's easy to say, engage with your tenant, give them a bit of time. It's easy to say, but if you depend on that income for this property and others, then it's very difficult to say that. In general terms, if we're talking about large buildings or several multi-unit buildings, what most of my corporate clients are doing is saying, right, engage with us as an individual. We're not going to engage through some interlocutor with you. We'll engage with you as an individual in respect of your personal circumstances, because no one wants to take the next step. No one wants to evict. And most landlords who are able are going to allow their tenant to, as we said the other day, back their way out of trouble, if one can. So I think the important thing to do is to ensure that your tenant knows that he or she can speak to you, to present their personal scenario to you, so that you can form a view, be it one tenant or 100, so that you can deal with that person as an individual in a way that will work out mutually the best for you. We've noticed over the last couple of weeks that these organizations, sort of hijack facilitators, have approached the non-regular litigators to attempt to intimidate them into signing codes of conduct. I'm not even going to name these organizations. I'm not going to give them the credibility of naming them in this August company that we're all in. They say, right, you sign this, and it will include no breach, no evictions, no credit control. Otherwise, we're going to go to court to legitimize a rent boycott. Now, there is no hope in hell of such an application succeeding. But if you're an individual property owner, you may well feel intimidated into signing that document. Now, I'm going to speak on behalf of my other three colleagues. If you're in that position, make contact with us at no charge. Let us know if someone is trying to do this to you, and we will point you in the right direction, because it's simply untenable. No one, if the rental tribunal is where issues like this can be dealt with, without even having to go to the expense of lawyers and court, etc., etc. But let no purported body intimidate you into signing a code of conduct, code of practice, etc. You have allies. We are they, together with everybody else on this platform. We are those who will collectively resist that kind of nonsense. So if you found yourself in that position, please make contact with one of the four of us, because you know it's not acceptable. Your way, you are not obliged to deal with some third party, even a committee. While we have an obligation to deal with committees, and we all do happily, let no one purport to intervene between you and your tenant, be they 1 or 1,000, because the landlord, this is Silna's point, and it's quite right. The landlord-tenant relationship is close, intimate, and personal, and it's between you and your tenant and vice versa. Someone else coming in and trying to intervene in that relationship, it's not appropriate.
Absolutely. I see, again, just to emphasize, the bottom line is when it comes to residential rentals, rent is payable if the person's enjoying occupation of the property, which for the most part seems to be the case.
Yes.
Threats being made in these letters use, for example, the Consumer Protection Act to try and hide behind and say that concepts like force majeure could actually be used or relied upon in order to avoid the payment of rent. But this doesn't make sense. I mean, we've gone through the common law. We understand it really well. And the bottom line is the actual payment of rent is possible. The fact that a person might not be able to have the money or doesn't have a job is unfortunate, but the reality is the actual act of payment is possible and the person is enjoying occupation. So that argument doesn't make any sense. I know that there was also confusion regarding the suspension of DAs on a breach. So DAs, by that I mean the time period from the date the letter goes out until the person can cancel an agreement. And there was confusion because the National Credit Act or the regulator said, well, insofar as listing persons, there would be a suspension of this time period. But this didn't apply to the Consumer Protection Act. And again, this was confused. And we even saw circulars by our own provincial government saying you cannot send a breach letter. But there's nothing in the regulations or the directives that provide for this. So there is confusion, but you have to kind of get past that. And exactly what Greg said, that's why we're here. Don't fall into that trap.
All right, perfect. I think that clarifies everything.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, sorry. I think the Wi-Fi just dragged a bit. I think that clarifies everything on hijacking of buildings. I don't know if you have any other aspect which you want to discuss with regards to that specifically.
No.
Sure. After 23 minutes, I think we need to give this topic a break and move on.
Okay, perfect. We have had a question with regards to the Rental Housing Act, which stipulates that inspection has to take place within 3 days prior to the termination date of the lease agreement. What is the practicalities with regards to this? I don't know, Silna, maybe you want to take this one?
That's a very interesting thing, especially when it comes to agents. I saw that question this morning, and it is from an agent, and I saw a few other agents commented on that. So for the landlord that does his own inspection and doesn't use a rental agent, that's typically easy enough. Because he will typically only have one inspection to do, where a rental agent could very well, if the leases end at the end of May, a rental agent can easily sit with 10, 20 properties that they need to inspect, and not all agents use third-party inspectors. So the practical implication is the Act clearly states that the inspection must be done at a mutually convenient time within a period of 3 days prior to expiration of the lease. Now, with all due respect to the legislator, I think when the legislator drafted the Rental Housing Act, it was definitely done more with multi-let and big buildings in mind. It refers to house rules and all things like that, which in the first part of this conversation made a lot of sense, like in your bigger buildings. But for the agent that's managing 15 properties, to do all those inspections in a 3-day time period is really impossible, especially if you want to do a good job. My advice to agents is always, as long as you can show that the parties agreed in writing, so over an email, that they will conduct the inspection at a mutually convenient time, even if the mutually convenient time is then after expiration of the lease. I just want to see that the arrangement of the mutually convenient time was done within that 3-day time period. And I want to see that in writing, because the truth is, we all know, to inspect a property while there's still stuff hanging on the walls, you have no idea what's hanging behind that picture. I mean, he's been sitting like this the entire lockdown. Everybody knows this. Everybody's been inspired now by this. But you don't know what's happening behind that. So it makes no sense, to be quite frank, to inspect a property while there's still items in there. Ideally, you would like to see the inspection done as soon as the tenant is out, but very often that's not practical. So as long as you can show in writing the inspection was arranged, because the intention of the act is you don't want a time period between the expiration of the lease and the inspection. You don't want an overly long time period, because then the geyser might burst and there might be damage to the walls that wasn't actually the tenant's damage. It wasn't damage caused by the tenant. It could be damage that the landlord is responsible for. So as long as all the parties agree in writing to a mutually convenient time, which is as close to moving out by the tenant as possible, then I'm happy that it's in compliance with the Act. It's a little grey, but I think it's safe enough grey. What do you think, Bruno? It seems like you don't disagree too strongly with my grey answer.
No, it's absolutely right. And I've seen it happen plenty of times, especially when you start looking at some of the smaller places that's packed everywhere with the tenants' things. It's virtually impossible to do any form of inspection while the tenant's actually on the property. So I have seen agreements, or at least engagement around that time going, great, we need to do an inspection. What's the best way of doing it? What suits you? What suits us? And I mean, more often than not, I've seen lease agreements actually be adjusted so that they go up until the closest weekend. And as there's the turnover of tenants, the agents jump in, quickly check, sign everything off. New tenant comes in and they do the incoming inspection. So it is just what's practical. And I agree with you. It wouldn't make sense to try and enforce everything within those 3 days, because most leases end month end. How are all inspections going to be done? It would be the busiest time of the month. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, and the poor rental agent has to get invoice payment reconciled. Somebody's going to start drinking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the disputes as to the damages and the amounts and what the quotes would be, and then fighting to get the deposit within X period. Yeah, it just doesn't make any practical sense, no.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you so
Nothing
much.
from your side, I'm guessing.
I love expertise. I can listen to it for hours.
All right, perfect. So we're still awaiting regulations for specifically level 3, which we're going into on Monday. We'll most probably have another live webinar on Friday. Well, it depends on when we get the regulations in. We do not have any further questions at this stage. I don't know if one of you guys have a specific topic which you want to address today.
Well, sorry, so just on the regulations, because I keep getting this question a lot, and it's quite, and it's quite unfortunate, but I've actually been booked on a couple of places that I'm supposed to be speaking about these regulations that don't yet exist. So these, we all anticipated they were supposed to come out at 12:30 today, if I'm not mistaken. So the unfortunate thing is, a lot of people are asking, great, well, can I have statements saying that I'm going to get back to work? I want to be able to send it out to my clients so that they know I'm back, but we can't. I mean, logically, it seems that we'd be able to, but we can't, because as far as we know, it's going from one level to the other, and the economy is going to start working again. What that actually entails, we don't really know, because the specific details aren't there. So by Friday, they should be there, because if government waits until Sunday, it's going to be a bit of a disaster. So by Friday, we're hoping that we'd actually be able to get back to everyone and give them an update. But yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think something interesting about the regulations, I got the same thing. Everybody keeps asking me, what's happening? What's happening? And I keep saying, I promise we're going to let you know the moment we have regulations. And there's been luckily, I think a lot of people learn from the level 4, those highly confidential things that everybody sent around the draft regulations, and everybody said in the WhatsApp, don't share with anybody else. But by the time somebody sends it to me, it's like the 15 millionth time I've received it. And we clearly saw that the draft regulations and the actual regulations has basically nothing to do with each other. Until something is gazetted, it's not real. And the easy place to check, I mean, you can keep an eye and we will let you know as soon as we have something. But if you want to check yourself, you're more than welcome. Go onto www.gov.za. As the government gazettes get published, it goes on there. So you will see everything. Yesterday, I accidentally checked, and the only thing I saw was an extremely morbid gazette on how to attend to COVID funerals. It was really not the most entertaining gazette I've ever read in my life. It was actually quite scary. And so we will let you know, but very important, if we focus on what the president says. By now we know the president says, guys, this is sort of the direction we're taking. Then they still have consultation process. Then they gazette. Don't add too much value to things. I know everybody had 5 heart attacks because the president said everybody is going to go to level 3. Then the Minister of Health said, okay, no, but the hotspots might not. And then the Minister of Health said, no, cool, everybody is going to level 3. Try to avoid the news. I know this is the weirdest advice you will ever get from me, but no, I'm lying. I give weirder advice, but try to avoid the news. Try to avoid the fact that News 24 published something or you see something on ENCA, unless it's backed by a government gazette and an actual regulation. ENCA doesn't have the power to make law. News 24 doesn't have the power to make law. The only true regulations are the ones that's gazetted. And you're going to save yourself so much time and energy and heartache and trauma if you just stay off social media, unless obviously you join us on Wednesday evenings.
Look, interestingly, I'm a news junkie. I've got Sky News going 24/7 in the background at the office and at home. And good advice, in those dreadful days leading into the lockdown when no one knew what was happening, but we knew trouble was coming. I saw some advice, which was good advice. Look at one trusted news source a day, because there's especially then, it's better now, but it's still the case that there's so much, you're being bombarded with information and very few people know anything. So, I mean, I must say for myself, that was good advice. I think I'm back to wall-to-wall Sky News, and I found even our local channels not at all bad, I must say. But good advice. If you're feeling bombarded, one catch up on the news a day, because it can overwhelm one easily. Hey.
Yes, and I've seen people that's usually quite positive, really just spiraling out of control into this complete panic. And I'm thinking, okay, but nothing actually changed right now. But if you see this multiple things shame, it's a tough time, and I think it's
a tough time.
It's important to appreciate that if we were in war, in a wartime with like actual tanks and guns and stuff, you wouldn't be, interested in going to Woolies, where right now it has the same traumatic feeling, but we all have to pretend like life is normal. It's a very, very strange time, eh?
It is a strange time. Look, I think hopefully we have more information now, and hopefully that will make people feel better. But your point on the regulations, I mean, on the same night we saw 2 conflicting versions of the leaked regulations. I mean, really, you can't plan on that basis. So we now know, as Silna said, that the regulations will come in, then they will change a little bit. You know, so even regulations aren't cast in stone. I mean, you know, the government said up front that this was unprecedented. They didn't know what was going on, and they were trying hard, and they did a good job. I think whether they're still doing a good job is a matter of debate, but certainly we gave them that benefit of the doubt which they deserved, and well, hopefully we all at level 3 quite soon. People can go back to work, people can start earning and paying rent.
So the experiences with my entrepreneurial clients, and I think this is where I'm very much concerned, is the inability to plan. And especially as small businesses, it's very difficult because going in one direction is going to cost you an arm and a leg versus going in another direction. And to tell the client, listen, you know what, stay put. That doesn't work because entrepreneurs can't stay put. They stay put for too long, they lose their business. Not even sometimes just a passion thing, it's a need. So stay put, don't listen to the news. Listen to the news as you might get some directions on where things are going, but then they're completely wrong. So it's just so unfortunate. And I mean, this isn't to say that government should be criticized, but the problem that I'm facing is for people to plan ahead. Some indications, some real indications would be necessary. To receive articles over the weekend saying, oh, these guys are going to be allowed. Oh, but we heard from this guy that was attending the meeting that they won't be allowed. Alcohol is now going to be allowed, but only beers. Then somebody else says all alcohol, cigarette. And you know, people involved in that industry are now kind of balancing and juggling all these stories. And where are we? We're 3 days from going to level 3. And we still don't know. So that guy that needs to open the store, that guy that needs to potentially start booking consultations with their clients to go on site, they're still sitting waiting. And now to then be told, oh, but guess what, level 3, but if you're a hotspot, you know, can we get an indication what a hotspot means? Is it, you know, X amount of people in a certain area? Fine, now they gave us the indication, but then are we going to stay on level 4 or not? Do I need to gear my business for that? Or gear it for actually being able, and I think that's the issue, is a bit more clarity, a less last minute kind of bombardment on, okay, great, this is what we're doing. And then, yeah, we shuffle around, we have special webinars trying to tell people, and then 7 days later, they change it and they allow tenants to move for a month. 7 days after that, they change it and allow tenants to move. And it starts getting very confusing, and it is going to impact the economy. And that is my biggest concern now, is the inability to plan. Give us a plan of action for like 5 months on, this is what we foresee. Yes, we can change it if need arises, but this is what we see as a level 3, but we'll move around between the different levels. So gear your business to be able to quickly pivot if you need to.
Bruno, I'm so happy you mentioned the 7th of May regulation. You made me think of something that I think we should mention. I've had quite a few questions during the week from agents asking me, Silna, so what happens now with the being allowed to move until the 7th of June, going into lockdown level 3? And I was like, nee, Jelle, no, wait. There was regulations on the 7th of May that opened a window 7 May to 7 June to move. Those regulations were repealed in totality, except for the portion where there was a permit issued in terms of those regulations. And then the regulation issued on the 14th of May that repealed the regulations of the 7th of May said you can move during lockdown level 4. So there's nothing about the 7th of June. The 7th of May till the 7th of June thing died on the 14th of May. So going into lockdown level 3, we do not know what moving of tenants will look like. My suspicion is that I can't see that moving regulations in lockdown level 3 would be more stringent than lockdown level 4, but I'm not putting money on it. I just can't see that happening. So I wouldn't be too stressed, but don't now try and arrange a quick move before the 7th of June, because the 7th of June is irrelevant now to the whole conversation. We will obviously know in the regulations what moving from property to property is going to look like, and we'll let you know then. But the 7th of June shouldn't be relevant in your life anymore.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. But we'll keep you posted on our page once we do have the regulations. Then we'll let you know. And I think that's about the time that we have this evening. Yeah, everybody enjoy the rest of your evening and keep warm and safe. And then we'll see you probably later this week.
Well, thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.